Hello, Tashi Delek. Welcome back. I hope you had a very meritorious day on Gandeng Amje. So let's recap what we discussed in our previous classes. So we talked about the importance of motivation, what determines whether our practice is a Dharma practice or not. So we discussed that it is so important not to be driven our Dharma practices by these worldly concerns, the concern that is focused only on fulfilling this life's goal. Because what happens is when we are so focused on this life's goals, then that kind of stains or disqualifies our practice as Dharma practices. So it is so important that our concern to extend beyond this life's concern. We also discuss about the definition of the term Dharma. So we discussed that Dharma refers to the practices that prevents birth in lower realms, that help us achieve rebirths in higher realms. So the implication is that observing ethical discipline is the minimum requirement. We also discuss Dharma being something to transform our actions from negative to positive. We also discuss about what Dharma really means. If our practice is to become a Dharma practice, then it must counter the afflictive emotions within us. If any practices that fuels or that increases, that facilitates the growth of afflictive emotions, then it is hard to say that that is a Dharma practice. At least, if not, at least it must reduce, it must help towards, it must contribute towards reducing the intensity of our afflictive emotions, if not to eradicate from the root itself. So that's what we discussed in our past classes. And from all this, we see the importance of motivation, the key, the role that motivation play in Dharma practice. So let's look at 3 different motivations. So depending on what motivation you adopt or we adopt, our practices are classified accordingly, and thereby in the baskets of three baskets, so which we can call it the 3 levels of spiritual practitioners. So whether or whichever basket we fall or not is dependent on our motivation. So the first level is called the person of small capacity. So what determines that? It is the motivation. Remember, we said that in order to consider or qualify our practice as Dharma practice, at minimum, it must extend beyond this life's goals. So now, when we focus beyond life, there are many things to focus on. So the immediate focus can be ensuring a good rebirth. And then if you go beyond that, it is to achieve liberation, emancipation from the cyclic existence, what we call Dharma. nirvana. And then if we go beyond that, it's called the complete nirvana or the enlightenment, the Buddhahood. So there are three goals to aspire to, three destinations we can get to. So the person of small capacity, as suggested by this term small, it is only concerned about ensuring a good rebirth. So that person is focused on preventing himself or herself from falling into the lower realms. So the practices that person engages is mainly to ensure a good rebirth, either a birth in Deva realm or human realm. So a person who strives to practice Dharma in order to achieve good rebirth in the next life is called a person of small capacity. So the motivation is to be is to prevent from taking rebirth in lower realms and ensuring rebirth in higher realms. So that person, that kind of person, that group of person is classified as persons of small capacity. And then there is a group of persons or practitioners who aspire for more than ensuring a good rebirth. This person realizes that as long as we are in samsara, there is not even an instance of real happiness. We are constantly undergoing suffering, whether we realize or not. So the person's goal is to really cut or sever the root cause of samsara, which is the ignorance, and thereby achieve nirvana or liberation. So this person realizes that even if we are able to ensure a good rebirth in the next life, but there's no guarantee that that very next life can lead us to lower realms. So the person sees that the root cause is our ignorance or the self-grasping. So as long as we counter that, as long as we eradicate that, there is no real peace. There is always danger of falling into the abyss of the three lower realms. So this person strives to achieve nirvana, emancipation from the cyclic existence, to be free from all the sufferings. So a person who strives to achieve that goal, to achieve liberation or nirvana, is considered the person of medium capacity. And then we have another level of practitioners who sees that striving to achieve nirvana for oneself is really a selfish goal, because all sentient beings have been our mother once, and they have been so kind. They have rendered so much health and kindness when they were our mother at that time. So now that we have some ability to discern what is right or wrong, at least when we have the wisdom and we have the capacity to pursue the path to enlightenment, and at that moment to ignore, to neglect our mother sentient being is really a selfish one. So we need to repay their kindness. The best way to repay is to bring them to the Buddhahood, to bring them to the state of happiness, state of lasting happiness, where the persons will be free from all kinds of sufferings. So at the moment, there is no way that we can fulfill that goal, no way that we can help even one sentient being, let alone all sentient beings. So when we think through who has that capacity, who has that potential, we realize that Buddhas have that capacity. So only when we achieve Buddhahood, then we will have the capacity to really liberate our mother sentient beings. So with that kind of realization, the person strives to achieve full emancipation, the complete liberation, which is Buddhahood. So of course this is driven by the mindset called the bodhicitta, great compassion and bodhicitta. So a person who cultivates bodhicitta and then strives to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings is considered or is called or is classified into the baskets of persons of great capacity. So you see that there are three different levels of spiritual practitioners depending on the motivation, depending on their particular motivation. So in order for our practice to become a Dharma practice, our motivation must fall into one of these three. If our motivation falls outside of these three motivations, then it is very hard to say that our practice is a Dharma practice. And also because of these different motivations, even when we engage in the same action, because of the different motivations, the merits will be different. Let's look at some of the benefits. First, let's discuss some, look at the importance of motivation. So there is this story in the sutra. This is from the sutra. Samba sangbe chilam ni tube ula kumbadang tishin shengi seyuba nigang kisi toparjurus. So what this means is there's a story about two persons. So one day, while it was raining, a person passed by Tsaza. You see the picture here. It's called Tsaza. So he passed by a Tsaza being kind of washed by the rainwater. So his intention is to protect that. To him, it's like, this is so holy, so precious. The rain is destroying this. So he looked for something to shelter it. But he couldn't find anything other than an old shoe. Since there were no other things to shelter it, so he used that old ragged shoes to cover, to shelter the Tsaza from being washed away. So he went by, and then after that another person passed by the same road, and he saw that an old shoe was put on this holy piece of Tsaza. So he thought that it is so disrespectful to put a shoe, such a dirty thing, on that holy piece of Tsaza. So cursing that person, he removed the shoe from the Tsaza. and then pass by. So it says, Nigang kesi tobarjo, despite their completely different action, but they both of them achieved in their later lives to become the emperor. So both accumulated merits to result in a life of an emperor. So here you see that whether an action becomes meritorious or not is not depending or is not decided by one's action. It is decided by one's motivation. In this story, even though the action is completely opposite, one put the shoe on top of the tzaza, whereas the other one removed it. But despite that, the intention is out of respect to the tzaza and to protect the tzaza. Because of that, they both achieve the same result, same merit, same positive result. So you see the importance. And also, whether an action becomes a virtue or not is also dependent on our intention, our motivation. Like Nagarjuna says, Dweja shedang timu sum tege lene mejiwa, maja medang timu me tege lene kewawos. Whether an action becomes a virtue or not it depends on what is the motivating factor. What motivates it? If it is motivated by attachment, aversion, or ignorance, then it becomes non-virtue. Whereas it is something propelled by love, compassion, caring, intention to help others, then it becomes virtue. There is also a story about one of the, Buddha's past life story when he was born as Mena Tongtong. I think you all know about the story. He was one of the sailors, and there was this guy. He was planning to murder all the 500 sailors, including the captain. So the Minang Tongtong, which is the early life of Buddha, so he killed that person to save the life of other 499 sailors. So despite the action of killing, but Mina Tungtung was able to cultivate merit from that action. It's mainly because of the intention. It's not only saving the lives, it is also saving this person. Because if he engages, if he proceeds with this plan, then he would have created or committed such a vast negative action, because he would be killing all the other 499 people. So that the consequences would be disastrous, detrimental for this person. So in order to save him from that disastrous ramification, Buddha had to intervene. As a result, Buddha was able to achieve good rebirth from that action. So we see how important our motivation plays a role in our Dharma practice. So, as we saw that there are three kinds of motivations, it is so important to engage our practices with the motivation of bodhicitta. We normally begin any practices with that setting our mind, bodhicitta mind setting. We do that all the time. But sometimes when we don't really realize it, it becomes just parroting the lines because there's no real feeling within us. So it is important to realize this. So in the Chunjuk, it says, Gyawa Shingun Chushin Shinduni, Debu Kene Sebra Chebani, Chanju Simjin, Junshin Tabarayang, Debu Jimbe, Mise Pewar Jurus. I think you have already gone through this explanation because I see that Chunjuk is one of the topics that was covered. So all other virtues are like the plantain tree. For after bearing fruit, they simply perish. So any practices, virtuous practices, that is not motivated by awakening mind, which is bodhicitta, it says that the results, of course, it will bear some results, but it will be just one-time result. It will bear the result, and then that's it. That's end of the virtue. Whereas, if any action, if any practices, if we do with the motivation of bodhicitta, then it will continue bearing fruits. Like what is called junshin, here is a perennial tree. It says unceasingly bears fruits and thereby flourishes without end. It not only bears fruit one time, it bears fruit all the time. It's like apple tree. When you plant the apple tree, when it comes to bear fruit, it won't die after bearing 1 year of fruits. Every year it will continue to bear fruit. So likewise, any practices that we do with the bodhicitta motivation will continue bearing fruits. So when we understand that, and if we are wise enough, why would we adopt such an inferior motivation? Why would we adopt a motivation that's a result, whose result will just give only one-time benefit? I always give this example. When it comes to saving money, first of all, we will look out for a great source of income. So we will always look for a job that pays well. We won't accept a job which is paying very low salary. We will always aim to get a high-paying job. So that becomes your source of income. We need a steady, good and steady income. And then what do we do with the money that we have saved? We will try to multiply it by investing in a good company. Like in India, we look for the banks that are stable, that are safe, and also the one that gives the best interest. We keep changing banks because we see that, oh, that bank provides highest interest, or that bank has a very good interest rate. So we always do that. So when it comes to Dharma, we should apply the same logic, same rationale. So when we engage in any practices with bodhicitta, first of all, it becomes a steady and high, like the high-paying and steady job. It becomes like that. Because when you engage in a practice with bodhicitta minds, if you compare that with the other two, that the motivation to secure a good rebirth, or with the renunciation. For example, when we engage, when we do one mala recitation of money, let's say if 3 persons do with this motivation, if let's say a 3 person do money recitation with these 3 different motivations, even though the action itself is same, the number of recitation is same, but because of the intention, the one with the motivation of bodhicitta is greater when it comes to the merit. It is far greater in terms of cultivation of merit. So why not? And then it says that it multiplies, it keeps bearing fruit, it keeps bearing result. So why not? So no matter what the practice you are doing, it could be a short practice, it could be a simple practice, like prostration, like offering an incense, like doing water bowl offering. But despite the, the insignificance of the action itself, but always try to do with the motivation of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is basically aspiring to achieve enlightenment. It's not for yourself. The primary goal of bodhicitta is to liberate sentient beings from the suffering world. But at the moment, we are unable to do that. So achieving Buddhahood is the means to achieve that primary goal. So our intention is like, I want to benefit sentient beings. I want to help. I want to end the suffering of sentient beings. But in order to do that, I need to become Buddha myself. So I am engaging in this practice so that I can become Buddha, and then I can help these sentient beings. So it is so important to generate that kind of mindset. Of course, it is best if you have this spontaneous generation of bodhicitta. If not, at least try the contrived one. At least try to say the words with kind of a bit of a feeling, bit of emotion when you say that, may I achieve enlightenment in order to save sentient beings. For that purpose, I'm going to engage this virtuous actions. May this virtuous action become the causes and conditions to become, for me to become Buddha, so that I can benefit sentient beings. So it is so important, so important. Otherwise, it will be a waste. It is like you have 2 options. One where you can earn $1,000 an hour. On the other hand, you can earn only $100 an hour. If you were given an option, which one would you choose? Of course, we all would choose the one that gives $1,000 an hour pay. So here is same thing here. We are given the option here. Which one you want to do the engage in practices with the motivation of bodhicitta, or just to ensure a good rebirth. And we have discussed the benefits. Very contrast, very, very, what you call, marked difference. So please, choose wisely. Try any practice. Let me rephrase. Try to generate bodhicitta mindset before engaging in any practice. That would be very meaningful. Thank you. We will continue next week.